I'm founder of Orlo. I'm mainly a developer, really, by background, so not my natural positioning as a managing director as I sit in now. But I sit actually very much heavily in the R&D department at Orlo. And I've been working really hard to look into the future a little bit and sort of understand where we're going with the technology that we have available with us today, and some of the companies that we're working with and the partnerships that we're involved in to really understand what we can do. So I first want to just sort of have a little bit of an insight into some of the amazing projects that we've worked on already, and with some of the kind of cool companies that we're working with to produce these cool, interesting features. So just to start off, here's a sort of 6 that I've grabbed. 2 I'll go into more detail on, but to give you a bit of an overview, Bromford, they are a housing association. So they have actually at the moment the largest CRM integration into their company going on at the moment with Dynamics across the EU. You wouldn't think it, but they really are. And we're working really closely with them to develop a Microsoft Dynamics plugin that works straight within our platform and synchronizes all the data between the 2 platforms. So that's been a really interesting project, and also working with Microsoft now, we've partnered with them, and we're starting to move forwards with them into that space. Another one we've worked with, partnered with even, is Accardo, with their real-time multi-channel support. And that involves a lot of live chat, and that's what I'm going to talk about on the next slide and go into a bit more detail. Robert Walters, omni-channel advertising. This one I'm also going to go into a little bit more detail, so I'll just leave that one for the next slide. But Pendragon is another really interesting organisation. They've got a wealth of different stores up and down the country, and they've been working with us on a level of automation that allows them to trigger certain events based on certain messages. Some of you might use the service called If This Then That. It's built very closely around that concept, but actually built within our platform so that you can trigger certain events based on an inbound message or an outbound message going on. So for example, if there's a keyword that came in that we detect, we can then spin up a bunch of actions, such as assigning it to a certain team, or marking it as maybe a sort of slightly aggressive message or such like, and then emailing certain people in the team to notify that event has happened. Another one that we've been working with really closely with is actually IBM Watson and Group Alsa. So Group Alsa is out in Spain, and they've got a huge coach company, and they've been trying to develop a natural language processing bot and using IBM Watson to do that. And I will again talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then finally, Staffordshire Police, who have a really unique set of problems in their call centres, in the sense that every message they receive is essentially part of a case, or could be essentially part of a case. And for them, this was a real troublesome thing, because in the social media world, messages have been deleted, changed, they're no longer available on the social networks. And so when they kind of asked us to come in and have a look at that, that was something that I sort of really started working on. And we've actually developed some sort of algorithmic process that allows them to encrypt the messages and essentially sign them to ensure that after that conversation has happened and they've created a case from it, that they could go back and, despite the fact there are missing messages from the social media, prove that those messages still did exist and that the contents of that exported set of messages are still untampered and realistically what really did happen. So that, in the case that they are going to court, they don't have to spend a wealth of money and time contacting social networks, trying to get that information. And if anyone out there has tried that, it's not that much fun. So there's just some of the partnerships we've been working with. But as I said, I'm going to go into a bit more detail with a few of them. So Accardo, these guys are the largest online grocery retailer in the world. They are actually what you think as a grocery retailer, but they think as a software company. These guys have more software behind the scenes than you'd know. That's practically how they built their company up, and they resell their model time and time again. When they came to us, they were looking for a one-stop solution that would allow them to manage both social media interactions, which they have plenty of, and live chat interactions. Now, if you look at Accardo and how they manage all their live chat instances across their cart process, when you land on the page, when you've got a problem, they came to us with this, and this is where we actually partnered with them to build our first live chat solution within our platform. Admittedly, big client to go ahead with a new project like that, but actually it went really well. And Accardo now use us across their site. So if you go to Accardo's site now and click on live chat, you're chatting through Orlo's platform, which is really exciting. And we have a wealth of new clients who are now taking up the live chat and using that. The real benefit here for Accardo, though, is the fact that it all happens in different places at different times. There can be something going off on Twitter, there can be something going off on Facebook, there can be something going off on live chat on the website. Now, if you imagine that across two different platforms, being able to have licenses for both platforms and having to shift the users between those two different tabs, and or even not having the licenses or ability to move them between, is a real hassle. Furthermore, you've got to train on both platforms, get the analytics out of both platforms and merge those together. So for this has been a real game changer for them to be able to understand exactly what sort of messages they're getting in overall across all their touch points, and analyze that as one big data set. Behind the scenes, we've also been working with them some really interesting kind of machine learning stuff as well, which has been quite exciting. I've been working on that. Furthermore, Robert Walters, this is a bit more marketing focused here, so less customer service, but these guys are working across 30 different countries, if I remember correctly, about 4,200 staff, and they're publishing using our marketing tool constantly about new recruitment opportunities. Now, they came to us with the problem, the fact that actually, if you look at that across an organization of 4,200 people, across 30 countries, the amount of content they're pushing out is just phenomenal. Now, that alone has an implication on the company, is how do they make sure all those messages are going out properly? How do they make sure they're going out with the right message and the right team members are sending them, and there are no poor messages being sent out, they've all been validated. Furthermore, they actually came to us and said, we actually want to start promoting those messages now and putting money behind those messages. Now, that as an organization is a very scary thing. You don't want people having the ability to be able to charge money to your card in theory. So although we've developed a whole entire marketing suite that allows them to create, validate and push out messages, and then even boost those messages ahead of time before they've even gone out. Now, that boosting can happen with set budgets for set people and teams. They can also allow them to understand which people are allowed to do that rather than giving permissions to everyone. And we can have certain people to actually sign that off and say that that's okay for that budget to go out. So this has enabled them to be able to change that kind of vision of them on social media and how they actually do that, and has really empowered them to push their content a lot further, especially in the era now where we do need to put a bit of money behind our content to actually get it seen. So that was Robert Walters. And now I'm going to start to look into a bit more of the future. So here at Orlo, I, as I said, sit in the R&D department, and a lot of R&D is spent at the moment looking at artificial intelligence and sort of machine learning. Those are the buzzwords we're all hearing today. Not many companies are actually really using them. I mean, I was at an event the other day, someone said, hey, put your hand up if you're using AI at work. And everyone's, oh, yeah, that's me. And then 3 seconds later, he said, okay, now put your hand down if you're not using it with real customers. Everyone put their hand down. And this is really the state of the industry at the moment. Everyone thinks they're using AI, everyone's excited about AI, and everyone's really kind of there with it, but no one's actually using it in real life. So we sort of foresee how we're going to use AI to help our customers and you guys in 3 key areas. And we've already started, so we're not messing around. So the first one is repetitive tasks. We want to take away those horrible repetitive tasks that your agents are having to do time and time again, because that takes up all the time in the inbox. So if you think how many messages your team receives, all those repetitive small tasks you do on each message, that adds up over the day. So we're going to try and take those away. Conversational AI, so this is now looking at bots, which is kind of the phrase that's used out there. And I've got some interesting scenarios that I'm going to position to you after this on how we feel the right way forward at this time is. And then analytical AI, and that's taking all that data that we have and making really good use of it, starting to understand it and starting to pull out more information from it that naturally is there when you look at the traditional system. So first, I'm going to go in with the big whack and say fully natural language processing bot. So that is a fully conversational bot. This is a bot that will talk back to you. And this is the project that we partner with IBM Watson and Group ALSA. So they have a coach company that's over in Spain. They are now already managing full conversations with IBM Watson. And The key here, really, where we were involved, is understanding when the bot goes wrong. These bots aren't perfect. They can't actually get to every message and respond with a sensible answer. So it's at that point we need to hand it back off to a real agent who can really understand and help the user rather than continually frustrating them with the stupider questions. So Orlo will pick up that message that the bot was originally analyzing, will track the whole entire conversation, bring it back into the inbox for the agent. The agent then can start to pick up the conversation, respond to the needed messages, and then hand it back off to the bot. So this for agents is sort of reducing the amount of kind of collateral FAQs in the inbox really quickly, and just give them the important hard messages that they've now got much more time to handle and get a much better response to. So, this has been really interesting, but I want to sort of position a slightly different strategy on this, because when I look at bots now, the amount of time and effort that Group Alsa spent training that bot, gathering the data, pre-checking it, to actually get a computer to understand what question is someone asking about a timetable and what time they're asking and what place they're trying to get to from where. That's very hard and requires actually quite a few conversational points to understand that. Now, the majority of you today will be using mobile phones as you travel around the place. Now, if you imagine picking up your phone and having a conversation with a bot that's asking again and again if they've picked up what you've written to them correctly, is actually really infuriating. And what's even more annoying is a bot comes back instantly. It doesn't wait, it doesn't show a typing sign, it just comes back. And especially when you're typing away on your phone, that becomes even more frustrating. And our research has led to find that actually that isn't necessarily the best way to do this. The other real big disadvantage to that world is if you've got a disaster that's unfolding on social media, your website's down or whatever it could be, you're not going to take a load of data, suddenly train a bot over an IBM Watson, re-release that model and get it back out there for your natural language processing bot to start to respond to your customers. So what we're looking at is a sort of a decision tree bot. Now, this is kind of quite common in the call center. Press 1 for this, press 2 for this. Very annoying in that world. But if you imagine it now on your mobile phone or a chat environment on your computer, you ask a simple question, and we come back and say, hey, I think this is to do with this. Here are the options you've got. Are you trying to travel from A to B, or are you trying to ask about these questions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just press on the one that's the question you've got to ask. And then we can take them through a set of menus, essentially, that gets them to the response they want and allow them to input. Now, this actually is really quick. If you look at how a natural language processing bot would have handled this and against what I'm calling a decision tree bot, we see that the time reduced on the decision tree bot is huge. The customer gets the same result and understands they're talking to a bot and understands they don't have to position stuff in a weird way to them. So they stop being weird as well to bots, which is another thing. So the other advantage of this is that if your website does go down and you have got a disaster unfolding in front of you, you can just add another question, another FAQ, position it right at the top, make sure that the people who are landing on your chat or your social media presence can quickly see that there is already a problem going on and there's an FAQ there that I can immediately click on and not have to speak to someone or wait to someone. So we can see that this resolves many more FAQs and instances within companies now and see the benefit for them now without having to learn how to train all their data, gather all that data together to train fully conversational natural language processing bots from IBM Watson. So that's just a bit of an insight onto really how those bots we feel are going to help. We can do a little bit more with those bots as well. So if you think of an instance where you're having a conversation and halfway through you need to process some personal information about that person, for example, check who it is, so do an identity check. We see that you'll be able to fire one of these bots off mid-conversation, which will then ask them a set of questions, and we'll be able to link back into your CRM to confirm that that is the person that you are actually talking to, and do an identity check, which will then hand back off to you. So we see a hell load more value within these right now today. And that doesn't mean that we're not investing in the future with the natural language processing bots. I just don't believe from my research and my understanding and testing of these bots that really we can do that for every single organization here practically within the budgets that you guys are looking at. So we see that as being a really interesting way of doing it and a neat tool. The other stuff is we talked about triggers early on. with the fact that we can sort of detect a particular word within a message, or we can detect that it's from a particular user or on a particular account. What we're actually doing here is starting to understand the text a little bit more. So this is looking at classifiers. So we are looking at the text and trying to determine if it's talking about a particular thing. So in this case, I've got disaster detection there, which sounds rather dramatic, but in the case of police forces, fire departments, a lot of public sectors are very interested to determine if a message is coming in is talking about a disaster. Now, if you can imagine that message comes in when you've just left the office and you don't pick it up till the next day, whether that's a fire that's been started, a gunshot that's been heard, a crash on the motorway, these could be a whole raft of things. Now with an Orlo, you can classify that, and if we do detect that they are talking about disaster, you can then fire off a whole bunch of notifications to important people to notify them to look at this message within the inbox. This is important. We can also flag that to a certain team, and you've got that whole power of Orlo then at your disposal to then push that message to the right area to make sure it's been dealt with correctly. Now that's actually already been tested. So when I say we're using this, we are actually using this already. Toxic messages is another one where we feel we can do a lot of good. A lot of companies already today are dealing with those trolls on the internet who constantly just hit your inbox with that next useless message. Unfortunately, they're out there. I promise I'm not one of them. But here we feel that we can actually start to determine if a message is essentially toxic. So you can do a number of things, and companies want to deal with this in a number of different ways. But what this gives you is the automation to be able to deal with that in those ways automatically. So whether if you want to pass it on to a specific person in the team who knows how to handle those, then you can immediately redirect that to that person on the message coming into the platform. Or alternatively, if you don't want to deal with toxic messages full stop, you can have an auto response provide back, for example, or you can even just mark it as read and just ignore it and just be gone with those sorts of messages and not engage with them. So again, this is providing that automation for you to not have to worry about doing these tasks again and again. The other area that we're looking at is the inbound query types. This is question, news, feedback, spam, classifying these messages into topics to allow you to start to prioritize certain messages. So if you're sat there and you've got more messages that you can handle, you don't need to pick up the people talking about you in the news. You don't need to respond to them. You don't need to get to them now. You can get them later. But you do need to get to people talking about questions. You do need to get people who are maybe feeding back to you next. And spam, well, you don't need to deal with that at all. So you can now start to sort of segment that inbox up and start to say, let's go after those important messages first that are maybe a little bit more sort of needing a bit more timely response. So that there is sort of a little bit of an example how we're starting to use some of those machine learning processes to understand text and then give you a means to action that automatically without having to do it day in, day out. The other area that I said that we're really trying to improve on is speeding up the agent. So we don't see replacing the agent as an option. We're always going to need that agent there. We always need someone with a human brain, a human touch, a human emotion to understand the customer and really start to respond to them. So if we can speed up every other part of their job just to allow them to then get on with that specific question, that's going to give them a much bigger advantage to them. So one of the things we're doing is we already are, for a lot of our customers, receiving hundreds of questions from their customers. So we are looking at those and saying the next question that comes in, we'll try and determine if that's close to another question that's already been asked. And given that this question has already been asked and answered before, we can provide suggested answers before they've even started typing. So we can already say, hey, look, this question about whatever it could be, booking or whatnot, here is an answer that's been used before. You can reuse that or just tweak it ever so slightly to make it yours. And therefore, you don't have to check spelling. You don't have to check what you're typing as much, and you can get that response out faster. And based on the fact that we've already seen that message in the past, in our inbox, we allow ourselves to tag messages so you can later dissect those specific messages and analyze them in statistics. Well, given that we've seen that message before and we responded like this, and you also tagged it like this, we can also now start to pre-tag the message for you and suggest those tags. Now, in our platform, it only takes, I think it was 6 to 10 seconds to tag a message. It seems tiny, but Rich earlier talked about 6,000 messages a day. 6,000 messages a day, and you're tagging every message, or you're going to have to go back and tag every message because you're going through a bit of a stormy period. It's not practical, but in reality, we can actually start to help now. and we can start to really sort of help the agents understand how to respond faster. So as you can see, we've got some sort of concept metrics up on there, but as I said, this is something that we're about to go into testing with on our own live chat in the next few weeks, and there onwards, we hope to get it out to some customers to really start to understand how they're working as well. And we've seen some great results just in our pre-testing of it, understanding questions that were maybe actually quite difficult, and being able to put that next response up. And finally, before I hand back over, AI and analytics. This is an ever-growing area, and we're trying to really make sure that we're picking out much information from your data. I really do mean that. It's your data. It doesn't sit in our platform for nothing. And we want to give you back as much information as we can. One of the things that we can do is entity extraction. So entity extraction is looking at different entities within that text and bringing that out to the forefront to allow you to then start to look at that as a piece of information. So if we were to talk about a train company, someone traveling from A to B, or complaining about a store in place in Leeds, or congratulating a store in Leeds, you might want to know about Leeds and where that is. You might want to plot that on a map and then plot that against sentiment. Now, at the moment, you can't do that. But with entity extraction, what we can do is we can read that text, pick out names, places, and organizations, and allow you then to actually look at those statistics later on and sort of start to dissect on sentiment and Leeds, for example, and see what people are feeling about your store in Leeds, opposed to how people feel about your store in London. So that kind of gives a whole kind of raft of information, extra information that you can start to pick out from your data and really start to understand what's going on. The other area that we're looking into at the moment as well, in the very immediate future, is anomaly detection. Sadly, this is a really easy thing to solve. When you look at traditional graphs, you can see an anomaly very easily. But when you look at social media, there are spikes all over the place. Lunchtime, when people go on lunch, everyone picks up their phone and starts going on social media. That causes a spike in the middle of the day. Again, when you commute in and go home, and then it all starts to die off. And then on the weekends, it's all day. But it's not during on Monday. And then on Wednesday, for some reason, you have a quiet day, and I don't know why, but you do. So when we look at each individual company, it's not the same either. So we're having to employ machine learning techniques to go back over your data and have a look what's happened in the past and be able to project that forwards into the future and say, well, hold on a minute. Given the fact that normally on a Monday you've got nothing going on, but suddenly there is now, we need to alert some members of the team to show them that they either need to bring more people in, or they need to get into the inbox and understand what's going on to be able to actually resolve the issue ahead of time. And we've seen this really, really importantly for police forces. We've seen this for many organisations who are worried about many parts of their organisation falling down, and often people take to social media to talk about it before they actually get to the company to say, hey, did you know your website's down? Or something like that. It often goes up on social media way before. So these anomaly detections will start to pick up those spikes in data. And we also want to then start to move that across different parts of your data sets so that you can monitor particular keywords, you can monitor different streams that come in based on different activity, and just basically allow you to really pick out when those big errors are going on and understand what's going on.